The runtime for Avengers Endgame has been a big topic of debate. 3 hours and 58 seconds. That's a long time. The longest comic book movie to ever release in theaters, and we're going to be in for quite a ride. But now we know exactly why it's this long. So Joe and Anthony Russo, the directors of Avengers Endgame, wanted to be very specific when it came to the runtime, and originally they said they always foresaw this as a longer movie. They didn't think 3 hours was going to be necessary, but when they started cutting the movie together and approaching the final cut, it was right around 3 hours and a couple minutes. And they went to Disney, and it ended up being 3 hours and 1 minute almost. 2 seconds off, but you know what I'm saying, kind of rounding up there. And naturally, you got to take off 10-15 minutes for credits, but it's a rather long movie. And when specifically asked about it, they wanted to talk about the fact of why this was a choice that they made. And essentially, when they started getting down to it, the film had a lot of themes going on. It had a conclusion. It had kind of a new direction. It had the characters going through so many emotions and things, and the story lent itself to such length that they needed this runtime. And ultimately, when they looked at the final cut, they were like, well, it's 3-ish hours, and Disney was fine with it because they didn't want to sacrifice what the story was. Now, this is in opposition to what happened, 4 or 5 years ago with Age of Ultron, because Disney looked at the almost 3-hour cut that Joss Whedon had and told them, cut that entire scene, and that one, and that one, and that one, and you can keep one. And he was like, well, I want to keep the Hawkeye scene with the family because that's going to be important for the future. Naturally so, we see that that was the correct choice to make, but they had to cut down the Ragnarok sequence, how Thor knows these certain things. They had to cut down a bunch of other stuff, and it just ended up for a uneven-ish film, which Disney didn't want to repeat that because Age of Ultron could have been a complete masterpiece from start to finish had they let Joss do his thing, but Disney was still meddling. Now they trust the directors, and Anthony and Joe Russo are like, we're getting to tell the complete story we want to tell, and nothing is limited. And honestly, that's great, because imagine forcing this grand vision that you've been building up for 11 years to be cut down to something that could be more streamlined. That wouldn't be fair to anybody, the fans or the directors.